Thank you. We use this line at Geo40. We made it up ourselves. It's DLE as our DNA, and I'm going to try and give evidence to that in about 10 minutes. So I'll just jump straight into it. We're an unusual business in the DLE space because we have a fairly mature business in silica recovery. This is our flagship asset in New Zealand. It processes about 8 million litres of fluid every day, and we produce about 3,000 tonnes of high-quality colloidal silica that we sell all over the world. As you would imagine, we took a fairly logical scale-up process out of the lab into pilot plant stage. We've got 2 of those, one in New Zealand, one in Japan. 5 years ago now we built a demonstration plant that still runs today, makes a bit of money, and then the big picture is our flagship asset. So we're a fairly serious business in silica, and I think the reason I started with this is that this is one of the key things that differentiates us in the lithium space. This is a journey we've done before. This big asset is the only plant on the planet that gets silica nanoparticles out of fluid, and it positions us very well for lithium. And just I guess another thing that's interesting, most of our silica sales are accompanied by what's called an EPD, which is an environmental product declaration. This is a piece of third-party work that quantifies the carbon footprint of our product. And we have the lowest carbon colloidal silica on the planet by a factor of about 5. And again, we'll talk about it through the next 3 days. We don't see a premium for green lithium yet, but we think it will come. When we started this business around a decade ago, I guess a group of miners got together and really tried to eliminate exploration risk. And the logic was to target geothermal fluids where geothermal power generation takes place. And New Zealand is an extraordinary leader in geothermal power generation. So the government drilled a volcanic plateau in the 1950s, and in 1958 the world's very first large-scale geothermal power station was commissioned close to a town called Taupo in New Zealand. And New Zealand has remained at the cutting edge of geothermal ever since. And so a group of miners 10 years ago, after decades in the Congo, said, crikey, there's got to be an easier way to get minerals. And of course it's this idea of targeting minerals and fluids. So the original technology hypothesis was to target hot fluids where you find high levels of silica and where you also find lithium, boron and cesium. And I guess a few things became apparent. Firstly, silica is quite a valuable mineral in its own right. But typically in these fluids, the lithium concentrations are quite low. And that's perhaps formed a key part of our logic going forward. I guess what wasn't apparent to the founders at the time was that this story is actually just as relevant to cold fluids, right? Where you maybe don't have so much silica, but you also have lithium and boron. But because we were initially chasing geothermal fluids, we were very focused on low grades. So a good geothermal power station might have lithium at 50 parts per million, maybe 70 parts per million. And so this really influenced our thinking as we got into DLE. We started the journey in direct lithium extraction 4.5 years ago now, and most of you will have seen this graphic. This is Alex Grant's graphic on the 3 broad technology families in DLE. Absorption on the left, that's Livent, Dow, Sunresin, and others. Ion exchange, Lilac, Standard Lithium originally, us, and then I guess a lesser number of players in solvent extraction. So because we were very focused on low-grade fluids, we went the obvious route and chose ion exchange. But that's where the similarities between us and most of our competitors end. Ion exchange is usually a kind of a bead, a fairly large bead in a column. That's the top photo, where you then pass fluid through that column and try and get it to stick to the surface of whatever you're targeting, to stick to the surface of the bead. We don't do that. We followed the process flow sheet of what's called CIL or CIP for gold recovery, carbon and leach or carbon and pulp. And in that method, we're working with a much smaller particle, which obviously has a much higher surface area. That's reasonably terrifying to a lot of folks, but because we've spent so long working with nanoparticles, this is something we're very comfortable with. And what that means is you can get ultra-high recoveries, which of course is pretty important if you're going to target low-grade fluids. As you would imagine, back in 2020, we built our first pilot plant. 2022, we built our second pilot plant. We built those plants actually during COVID, when it was pretty hard to go out and travel the world. So we built plants at home in New Zealand, and we shipped brines into these plants. And so Christmas 22, we got to 100 cycles for the first time. We're now running up sort of beyond 500 cycles. And a number of things come out of that. We've got very low media losses per cycle, down in the fractions of a percent. Our media cost is very low. We're not making a complex bead. We're making a very simple media. Low impurity carryover, and with almost every brine we've processed, we make battery-grade lithium carbonate. And so like anybody in the space, we started processing different types of brines. As I've mentioned, we started on geothermal brines, both out of Europe and New Zealand. We moved on to classic salar brines. We were able to process medium and high-grade salar brines very successfully. And then on to brines out of the US and Canada. And I think Joe will cover this in his panel this afternoon, what we tend to see is really absorption technologies seem to work better at higher grades, and ion exchange, and particularly sort of CIL, CIP style of ion exchange, works very, very well at the lower grades. And so this is the space where we believe we have real strategic advantage, the sort of 50 to 250 ppm grade. And that's super interesting, because if you take out two pieces of geography in the US, most of North America is in that grade range, right? So, to sort of, I've read Volt Rush. What we're really trying to do here is to unlock the potential of these brines in North America. I'll just explain why we think we can do that. This is an OPEX versus grade curve. So what we've done here is we've plotted on a handful of the brines that we've processed and modelled OPEX on. What that shows you is a New Zealand brine at 10 ppm. That's not commercially very attractive, as you might imagine. But interestingly, there, American brines at 25 and 50 ppm versus European brines up at sort of 200 ppm. The OPEX isn't that different, right? And that is a fundamental feature of our tech. We have to pump a bit more brine to get the same number of lithium ions, but actually the OPEX curve is very, very flat. And that's why we believe we can work very extensively across North America. I just think it's worth touching on tech just for a second, and I get asked every day, which tech will be the winner. Look, I think you have to understand, I guess every brine is different. If you're working in Central Texas versus Western Texas, the brines will be different. They'll be different 10 kilometres apart, sometimes half a kilometre apart. And then what goes with that is the nature of projects, right? And in every project you look at, the inputs will be different. You'll have obviously the different brines. You'll have different reagent costs, state by state, province by province. You'll have different environmental regulation. You'll have different utility costs and so on, right? And what that means is that the techs will all shake out and perform differently in different places. I think perhaps there's a broader thematic here, and that if you follow sort of Goldman's latest piece on techs, there's perhaps a couple of dozen DLE techs in development, and I think out of that we expect sort of half dozen or so will emerge at scale in the near term. We certainly plan to be one of them. But I guess the contrast is there are hundreds and hundreds of lithium resources out there, and what that tells you is the lithium world really is sort of another cliche, but it's tech short and resource long. And so we don't see other DLE players as competitors. We want them to succeed as much as we wish to succeed, and where we can help them, we will. Because the sector needs all of us. The top is our journey in silica. We're following that exact same playbook in lithium. Right, bottom left is our second pilot plant. It's been running very successfully. What we're heading towards is a demo plant. We'll be in design of that next week. And then what we're trying to get to is our first sort of 5,000 tonne per annum plant as fast as we possibly can. One of the ways we're going to get there is I guess, an interesting program of work over this year. I just want to draw your attention to that middle circle. So we've done a lot of piloting on brines in New Zealand with brines that we've shipped. We're now repeating some of that work in the field. And so this is, we've built two of these. These things are on the road now in North America. The idea really is it's pretty straightforward. We turn up on a resource owner's site at no cost to that resource owner. We will process their brine. give them back a decent quantity of lithium chloride, some lithium carbonate, and a long-form technical report on what our tech can achieve on that resource. Right? And we're doing that to get wide exposure to North American resources, figure out where we can work most successfully, but also to open up and I guess prove to different players in the sector what we can do. And we know we have to prove what we can do. This is the T-shirt. This is roughly where the tour looks like it will go. We've been building in Wyoming and California. We're heading to West Texas in about a week and a half's time. We're hoping then to head east and then up through the middle and then eventually up into Canada. Music lovers might recognise the font and the cheesy bottom line, you know, North America, lithium nirvana. So it's looks like being a lot of fun. I just want to touch on, you know, North America is a very interesting place in terms of lithium brine resources, and we've heard a lot about the oil field formation waters, or the separation waters, probably more accurately. And we've seen Exxon buy an interesting site in Arkansas. I think these resources are very interesting because they're the opportunity to scale fast. Now, these are brines that have been separated from oil and have been re-injected since the 50s. Right? So if you can target these brines and pull lithium out of them, that is an opportunity to scale fast. And the scaling opportunity is really on the DLE guy. It's really limited by how fast the DLE player can scale up. And we think that makes these, you know, particularly interesting in the near term. I guess the interesting part there is if you're working on oil and gas separation waters, you will have to do pre-treatment of those brines. So you have to get good at being both a DLE guy and a pre-treatment guy. Those things sit hand in hand, and they will drive your OPEX, and you need to be very good in that space. I think the other extreme that we're seeing in North America is, I guess, the cleaner formation waters. This is drilling holes into aquifers. That's a space that's not quite so developed. A lot of people are, you know, still land banking, just starting to think about drilling programs. That's going to take some time. I guess the nice thing about those brines is they're typically cleaner, so your pre-treatment costs tend to evaporate, and they'll probably lead the cost curve in the medium term. I think the other thing that's interesting is another sort of resource category in the middle that's emerged, things like potash brines. Some of these brines that didn't look very interesting a couple of years ago that might have had 80 ppm lithium in them, if you've got the right tech, they become pretty compelling. Look, our job this year is really to try and get this right. We'll get out on a bunch of sites. You know, our job here is to emerge this year. We've been pretty invisible as a New Zealand company. That's changing very quickly. You know, we want to be the DLE partner of choice in North America, and we've got a fair idea what that looks like. That means we need to have the most robust tech that works across a whole range of different resource types. You know, we want to be the best supported technology. We think a DLE tech partner has to be glued to the project for the life of the project. Right? DLE is complex, the offtake products are complex, and the brine will change. That means you need a great team, you need to be great people to work with. You also need to make the best quality products you possibly can at the back end, right? Lowest impurities. And much as we do in New Zealand when we work with Maori and exercise kaitiakitanga over our resource, you obviously need the highest standards of environmental performance. And we think if we do those things right, that will get us into, you know, partnerships with the best brine owners. Right? We think the best brine owners want the very same thing. As you would expect, we're a fairly small company, but we do formal ESG sustainability performance reporting, 2 annual reports, a sustainability performance report and an annual report. You know, when you're working with oil and gas majors in the US, they would expect nothing less. And I guess just to wrap up, you know, we've heard a lot of negative sentiment about price. I think there's an interesting piece here. I think the fundamentals of the industry are very strong. If anyone's driven the car that's parked out in the exhibition hall, it doesn't take any convincing. These are great cars. We think lithium's never been more exciting than it is today. And just to wrap up, Tribeca, we use them in an advisory capacity. We like them very much. We're very pleased they're sponsoring this conference. They're also one of our investors. So kudos to them for bringing this group together.